Thank you, Ray, and good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to see all of the names and locations popping up of our participants today. Wherever you are, I hope that with all of the crazy weather patterns that we've been seeing, whether it's the fires in the west or the flooding in southeast, that all of your family and friends are safe and doing well in what I would say is one of the crazier times that I think I've ever experienced. As Ray mentioned, this is one of our webinars that we are bringing to you today from the National Watershed Coalition. And if you're not aware, the National Watershed Coalition is a nonprofit 501c3, and we are comprised of national, regional, state, and local organizations, associations, and individuals, and we advocate dealing with natural resource problems and issues using watersheds as the planning and implementation tool. Currently, this is our NWC officer team. I'd like to welcome our most recent officer, Vice Chair Tina Hendon. She and I haven't actually met yet, but I saw she was on the webinar today and want to give a shout out to her. These folks work very closely with Dan to try to bring and move our things forward. So specifically what National Watershed Coalition does, very quickly, we advocate using total resource management principles in planning and believe that the USDA Small Watershed Program is one of the amongst the best planning and implementation vehicles, along with wise water and land management. We represent the concerns and needs of Watershed Project sponsors at the national level. We offer assistance on watershed planning when requested. We provide resource testimony before Congress on watershed programs and policy, and believe proper care of our nation's natural resources should be a top national priority. We host a biennial National Watershed Conference, as well as develop many publications and maintain our website and Facebook page. So if you haven't before now, go out to Facebook and like us and become our friend. Also, go out to watershedcoalition.org, and this is where you'll find lots of information about our conferences and workshops, these webinars, different feature articles, videos, and lots of fact sheets that could be very useful to you. So coming up very soon is the biennial meeting. We are holding this in conjunction with our partners, the National Association of State Conservation Agencies, October 3rd through the 7th. We're making plans and implementing as many safety protocols as we can in an effort to keep everyone safe and healthy while attending the conference. And just to know, early registration ends this Friday, September 3rd. So, and the hotel group rate is also good through that date. So if you have opportunity to go, please go out to our website or to Ray knows the website, probably conservation. I forgot the website address for the meeting, but we can put that in the chat for anyone that might be interested.
Yeah.
So this, as I mentioned, so if you've participated in one of our webinars in the past, if you like what you see here today, which I think you will, consider becoming a member of the National Watershed Coalition. It's the best $25 you'll spend, I believe. We're a good group of folks that can provide information to you. To become a member, you just need to go to watershedcoalition.org and you'll see the membership information there. And we would love to have you join our organization. These webinars came out of the pandemic, but I think it's something that even if we weren't in a pandemic, we would continue to hold. We've had, just like you'll see, this one will have over 100 participants. Every one of them we've had has been well attended, and I think the information presented has been has been very useful. So Ray has thrown up a poll on the screen there asking, are you a member of NWC? And there's a couple of options to answer. And so if you would, please take time to answer that poll. So enough from me. Just wanted to give you a welcome and hello, but also let's move on to the reason that you all signed on today. And so it's my pleasure to introduce our webinar presenter, Bobby Weitzcarver. I could, after looking at his website and all of the different things he's been involved with, I could probably take a whole lot of time to let you get to know him, but I'm going to let him do the majority of that. So Bobby is a farmer, a conservationist, a soil health champion, an educator, and an award-winning writer. He and his wife make their home in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which is one of the most beautiful places on earth, I think. He's retired from USDA NRCS with 31 years of field experience, and it looks like he has had significant work in the PL 566 and 534 projects there in Virginia. And today he continues his life's work of restoring watersheds through his private consulting business, Weitzcarver National Resources Management, LLC. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Ray and Bobby so that we can get this webinar started off. Thank you all.
That sounds terrific. And Bobby, right before you start, I'm going to promote your publications here too. I'll leave that up on the screen while I launch this important next poll. First of all, I'm going to just go over the results of the Are You a Member of the National Watershed Coalition. 16% of you indicated yes. Of the folks that gave us a response, 77 no, and 7% said want to be, Lisa. So we've got some folks then that we definitely want to be a part of our organization. So let me give one more poll, Bobby, right before you start out to kind of create that interest here and in our effort. We've got the next poll that I want to put up here, and if I can, or put it up. And so let's see here now. Here we go, folks. This one's an important one. Have I mentioned this question? All right, here comes the question. So pull on in there. Have you shut off your email, web browser, eliminated distractions, and are ready to learn from Bobby Weitzcarver? I know I am, and I am excited about this opportunity. Some of you are going to claim that you have to monitor all of the emails and web browsers and so forth during the course of this event. I'd encourage you, just give us as much time as you can by shutting those things off. That would be great. And we just so enjoy having you join us for the National Watershed Coalition webinar on 7 principles for selling. Just couldn't be more proud to have you join us, and thanks for finishing that. Just to share the results, Bobby, here are the results. We had 87% of them have turned off their stuff, yeah, so they're ready to learn and have you share with them. So Bobby, let's test out the technology one more time, make sure that things are working on your end. Go ahead, fire away, Bobby.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for having me, and thank you all that are on for the privilege of your time. I hope you get a lot out of it. I do want to give a shout out to a couple of my colleagues that are on board here, Kendall Tyree and Don Wells, David Kriz, Becky Ross in New Hampshire, Steve Lucas. He and I used to work together in Fauquier County years ago. I've got the team at the Headwaters Soil and Water Conservation District here with Mike Jimenez and Aaron Lucas. So thank you all for joining me today. And also John Reeves. Now, this picture is where we farm in the Shenandoah Valley. We are at the headwaters of the Shenandoah River. And tomorrow when the sun comes out, this is what it'll look like. This is my wife, Jeannie. Let me go back. That's my wife, Jeannie, and our valuable border collie, Val, who is worth 1.2 men and 2.0 husbands. Ray did mention that I am familiar with the PL 566 program. And when I was the district conservationist in the Headwaters District, where we have 16 flood control dams, we are still in the process of rehabbing these dams. And this is one of them, Robinson Hollow, that we were successful in rehabbing. This is one of our herds on our river farm. We practice rotational grazing, and this picture is our river farm. Let me back up one. It takes a little time there. This is the Middle River, and this is the buffer that we established in 2004. We enrolled in the CREP program in 2004, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. In September, we purchased another farm on Whiskey Creek, and we have installed about a mile of livestock exclusion fence, and in December, we're planning to plant about 3,000 trees and shrubs with the help of our Virginia Agricultural BMP program. So we're really excited about that. Now, Ray, this is a polling question.
You bet. Let's grab that polling question then and ask the question of the folks. Are you involved with any riparian buffer mitigation work? Going to launch it right now. Go ahead and poll in, expecting all 131 of you to indicate, are you or aren't you involved with riparian buffer mitigation work? Results are spilling in here. We'll give it a little bit of time, Bobby, to let that poll happen.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for the results, this whole webinar started when Dan read my book, Bobby's 7 Principles for Selling Riparian Forest Buffers. Now, some of you have downloaded that. It's free. You can have it and use it. But Dan and I wanted to make this webinar sort of a hybrid of not only how to sell conservation, but we've kind of tweaked it to how to sell conservation, Watershed Project, mitigation, or a new pair of shoes. It doesn't make any difference. It's all the same principles apply to anything that we're selling. And let's face it, we're in the job of selling conservation.
So we got a kind of a split house here, Bobby, for your audience today on this webinar. 48 of 104 that responded said that they are involved in riparian buffer mitigation work, and 54% or 56 folks said they weren't involved. So kind of a split house for you today.
That's all right.
All of them anxious to learn.
Well, here's the 7 principles. I'm just going to give them to you right now. Set your own goals, build trust, build a winning team, master the processes, make it simple, market and remarket, and know your product. So let's talk about each one of these. I'll tell you some stories about how these worked out for me. And, my work with, 40 years of doing this, I have, congealed all that experience into these 7 principles. So the first one is set your own goals. Now, most of us have a supervisor, and sometimes we sit around the table and we divvy up the goals, and that's great. And we'll just reach those goals with alacrity. But I'm suggesting that you have your own goals that make you satisfied with your work. And I'll give you an example. You know, we did have goals for dam rehab, but I never once had a goal from my supervisor for riparian buffers. So we as a team, we set our own goals for things that made us more satisfied in our work. So we're gonna build trust. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do that by building relationships with people. And you do that with, you know, there's two sets of folks. We have sponsors and producers, and that's where we're going to sell our products. But you also have internal specialists that we need to have a good relationship with to help us with the processes, which oftentimes get in our way. So if you want to get somebody's applications through all the processes, you have to have a good relationship with the internal specialists as well. So you have to be there. Trust is built with one-on-one interaction. Now, how do you do that? Well, you start off with short visits. Just drop by to see the sponsor or see a client, you know, a producer, stop by for short visits. Don't waste their time. You know, you want to be the person that when you drive into the parking lot or on the farm, you want those folks to say, oh, here comes Johnny. I'm so glad to see him. You don't want to hear or see them run away. You know, you want to have that relationship where they want to see you. So invite people to events, give them a call, mail them a postcard, keep trying to build that relationship. Take forms to them. We used to do that all the time, because how annoying is it that, you know, somebody has to come into the office to sign one piece of paper or a bunch of papers. Take the forms to them. We can do that. And above all, we need to listen to our clients, our producers. Listen to them. And we've got to deliver what we promise. I'll never forget the year that you know, Congress didn't sign the Farm Bill and the CREP program just fell out. You know, we had all these applications and it, you know, it was hard to deliver what we promised. And so we've got to make sure we can do that, or do everything we can to make that happen. We need to follow up. We need to, you know, when we put the project in, we, you know, just don't walk away. We need to go back and follow up and see how things are working. And understand that trust takes time. Now, the third principle is building a winning team. So your team are the folks you work with. Your, you know, the day-to-day people, the internal sponsors, it might be the county administrator. And we need to recognize the value of diversity. And we need to go beyond the, you know, race and religion. We need to think about the diversity of personalities as well. And we need to match our clients with the right field person. And I think this is very important, and that's to cross-train every member of the team. You know, our team at Headwaters was the NRCS folks, the district folks, the Department of Forestry folks, might have been the county folks when we were working on dams. But we need to cross-train everybody. In Virginia, we have like 8 programs to help farmers fence their cattle out of streams. And I think every field person needs to know something about all 8 of those programs, because the client, the farmer, doesn't really differentiate whether you're NRCS or district or Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And it doesn't matter. And as long as we're all on the same team, right? Now we need to master the processes. And so there's so many processes in our work today. As you can see, and by the time our programs roll out, it's too late to be complaining about the processes. We need to figure out how to master them and move on with it. Complaining takes up a lot of wasted time anyway. Recognize that processes can impede progress toward the goal. You bet. So we need to find the most expeditious way to maneuver our client's application through these processes. Now this is a very important point that I want to make and stress to the administrator folks out there that processes are really supposed to increase our efficiency, not make it more difficult to get more conservation on the ground. The fifth principle is to make things simple. The number one reason that people don't participate in government programs is because of all the red tape and all those processes that go on. I tried to shield my clients against all these processes. They don't really care about those processes. They care about getting something on the ground. And don't use jargon. Our clients really don't care what the CPA 52 is, or what, PL 566, that's jargon. So, don't use jargon. And when we present options, especially to individuals, farmers, we need to present options on one piece of paper with no jargon. It's easier for them to select from 2 or 3 options and not 8. The sixth principle is to market and remarket. You all know every time we repackage the BMP, the best management practice, we get new clients. So my point here is to never stop outreach. You never know what might trigger conversion. I'll tell you a little story. Headwaters District, we would have a tour of recently installed best management practices every year, and we would rent a school bus, and we would take people on a tour of various things. And Bob, the bus driver, was a bus driver every year, and he was a farmer. And one year he came in to sign up for the CREP program, the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. And I asked Bob, I said, Bob, what convinced you to get in the program? He said, well, you all kept sending me letters and postcards, and I kept going on these tours. And finally, I just decided it was time for me to do it. Sometimes it takes people years and sometimes generations to, get with it. So never stop outreach. And selling is basically overcoming 2 big questions sponsors have, or producers. Is it worth it? And am I able to do it? Is it worth it? The benefits to sponsors. And we'll talk about the benefits to farmers here in a little bit. Benefits to sponsors. There are many: saving lives and property, water supply, recreation, etc. And there's, all this funding out there. And unfortunately, they come at different times. So, it's kind of fun to juggle all these funding sources. Am I able to do it? You need to be there to help them do it. We need to inspect the project during construction. Every single time we would go out to inspect, there's always something that needs attention. So we need to take ownership of that. we need to help them find funding. Not everybody's got $20,000 sitting around to pay for the upfront costs. So we would help people find a loan, and we would help them with forms and permits. I think that's part of our job. All right, Ray, we've got another poll here.
Yes, and this one, before I launch this poll though, Bobby, you mentioned a couple of things that really piqued my interest, and I've got a question or two, and we're going to invite everybody to use the question and answer area on your dashboard. Go ahead and type in your questions to Bobby. Bobby, you just hit on something that's so important. When you mentioned maneuvering a project application through the system, what's your best practice for doing that?
Well, now what do you mean? You mean like a PL 566 project?
Yeah, any of the projects, you spent a long time in your career, taking a project or an activity. It could be any of the Farm Bill programs, or perhaps even a program of some other agency or organization. But you have mentioned the service oriented part of this, but maneuvering that project, through its hoops. What's your best practice for doing that? A lot of folks dealing with that are on the webinar today.
Well, thanks for the question. And I'll tell you, we would have staff meetings every single week.
Oh, okay.
And we would have a running list of all the projects.
Mm-hmm.
And my worst fear was to let some client slip through the cracks and we forget them, or so I think coordination and working together is the key to getting things done, and that includes our internal specialists. One person in the chain, and all these processes we have engineers, we got biologists, we have contract people. It's like this maze of processes, and it's our job. If I'm in charge of my client's application, I'm going to be, I'm in charge of that application, getting through all those processes. I take ownership of it, and I want help doing it, so working together, that's how you get it done.
Taking ownership, and wow, that's a great idea to have those weekly check-ins. And I got to think your conservation district boards or sponsors of all different shapes and sizes of PL 566 or other projects, right? They really appreciated that weekly update too, or at least a monthly update, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
So before we do the poll, I got another question for you. Man, you hit on something that's just near and dear to my heart, and that's the motivation of the individual that can make a decision on their landscape, right? It could be a landowner, it could be the producer, it could be a renter of land, it could be any of those folks. How did you best get that? How did you best get that question? What question did you use to invite that dialogue with that landowner of their motivation? Because that's everything, right? Is find out what it is.
It's kind of an art, and we have to listen. The goal is to get invited to sit down at the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if we listen to them, we can find out what they need, for example, or we can plant questions out there to let them answer, like, what would happen if there was a watering trough way up here on top of the hill?
Mm-hmm.
And they'd go, oh, wow, that would really be nice. Well, then, it just unfolds. So asking questions and listening, and not boring them with all of our bureaucratic jargon and program rules. That's the worst thing you could do.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to work with several technicians over the course of time. And one of the questions I would suggest asking a landowner is, the first thing is go out onto their place, if you're invited, right, like you said, and ask them, what have you done recently for conservation, right? what have you done recently? What's your project that you've done recently? And have them haul you out there in their pickup or whatever, or your pickup, and go out and look at it. Second question that I would recommend, from time to time would be, what's your next project? What is it that
Yeah,
you want
that's
to
a
do?
good
Right?
question.
What is it that you want to do now? And then the third question seals the deal, right? I'm a big power of three guy. I like power of three. So first question, what have you done recently? Take me out there and show me. Second question is what you planning on doing? What's your next project you want to do? Third question, what can I do to help? Which builds on your sixth
Right,
step.
right.
You're doing this right now. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
So
What's
talk to us.
what are your, what do you want the farm to be like in 20 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your dream?
Yeah.
Just sit back and listen.
Yeah. Well, didn't you tap on that? I know the folks are writing it down on their paper right now. Listen, listen, listen. Ask the right question, right? And then shut up and listen intently to what it is the individual is telling you, because all of the stuff you got in your arsenal of programs and projects and fundings and that sort of thing all depend on what that individual wants to do on their place, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So cool. Oh my gosh. I am so inspired. Thanks so much for sharing those things. An invitation to question and answers. Go ahead and ask those questions of Bobby, any shape or size. He's prepared to talk about any of those things. But one of the things that we do want to ask you is, do you have any projects where livestock create problems? And these are project activities that you may be working on. So projects where you've actually seen livestock be some of the problem. Go ahead and answer that now. We'll give Bobby time to grab a water or another sip of coffee or something, and that sort of thing. And I wish for every landowner that they had a Bobby White's carver, look-alike or the same principles, right, being used. And the purpose of this webinar is to give these tools, these 7 steps, so a lot of people can practice this. But you really said a lot when you said, listen, ask the right question, hopefully get invited to their place, go out into the field, right, and take a look at some of the things they want to do. And
Right. Yeah. I wanted to, I forgot to tell a story about making it simple.
yeah, do that.
I remember when we were in the rehab public participation stage of one of our dams. It might have been Robinson Hollow, that picture I showed you, but we had public meetings where we would go inform the public and invite them to a meeting to understand what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a gentleman raised his hand and asked a question. I don't remember what the question was, but I remember what the answer was. The engineer said, "Oh, I'd love to answer that question, but in order to do that, I've got to go out to my car and get my briefcase." And he went and got his briefcase and brought it back in with these volumes of books. And he proceeded to answer the question in total engineer jargon, which, nobody understood.
And it's important. We've gotten to remember that some of these landowners also, though, are engineers on their own right. They're agronomists. They're trained professionals, some university graduates, some doctorate graduates that have made it their way back to the farm. Some aren't, but all of them appreciate a more simple discussion. They'll ask you more questions if they want the engineering jargon, and they're engineers. They'll certainly crank into that engineering jargon. But shoot, knowing the motivation, right, and a little bit of the background of the individual you're visiting with is helpful. And you're not dumbing down anything, because my dad did not graduate from college. He had a high school education, but he read every agricultural report, everything that he could read, and was a good conservationist because of that. And he could talk a lot of conservation with you if you were willing to listen. And so it really, really nice. All right. So Bobby, here's the deal. 80 folks of the 96 that responded, 83% said, yep, they've got some livestock. They've got projects they're working on where livestock creates problems. And then 16 or 17%, 16 people, 17% said they did not. So let's share those results out there for everyone so they can see them. There they are, the results of our poll. And Bobby and I thought this would be a good place for a poll so that his next topics that he's going to be discussing with you have a lot of relationship toward the livestock creating problems in a project that you might be interested in. And so really pleased with that. Again, share your questions up on the questions dashboard. Back to you, Bobby.
Okay, thank you, Ray. When Dan and I were talking about, designing this course, he mentioned that riparian buffers was on the forefront of mitigation projects for flood control dams. And so we want to bring in now the best management practice of putting in riparian buffers. So our products could be dam rehab, it could be mitigation, but we're going to focus now on riparian buffers. So there's basically three parts to a riparian buffer. You've got the buffer itself, which are the trees and shrubs. You have the fencing system, and you have the livestock watering system, which is the most important for the farmer. And we're going to talk about each one. So let me back up there. Sorry about that. So this is a picture of our river farm, and everything you see there is a separate grazing unit now. When we started in 2004, this was just one big 40-acre pasture, and the cows had access to the river and 2 tributaries. And in 2004, we set out to exclude the livestock and to plant trees along the hydric features, which we did. And I also sample the river for E. coli when the river comes onto our farm and when it leaves our farm. Now we have a half a mile of middle river, and we use E. coli as a indicator of pollution. And this is a picture of a petri dish where we incubate the water sample and grow out the bacteria cultures. And the royal blue and dark purple dots in this petri dish represent colonies of E. coli. And so on this particular project, this is Pogue Run, which is a stream in the city of Stanton where we have completely restored the whole watershed. And we're now stocking this stream with brook trout, which is a native trout to Virginia, and also is a pollution sensitive trout. And so before we fenced the cattle out, this was the E. coli dish, and that's after. And I just wanted to share with you, this is pretty amazing, the difference between the E. coli before and after. And in Virginia, we have a state standard for E. coli in fresh water, and it's 410 colony forming units per 100 milliliters of water. And what that means is if you're above 410, the likelihood of a person in the water ingesting that water or getting it in their eyes or ears could lead to infection or some type of illness. And if your cows are drinking out of a stream, then the biosecurity program on your farm is only as good as the worst farm upstream. And I'm going to explain that a little bit later, but that's a pretty powerful statement or piece of knowledge that you need when you go talk to a farmer and would like them to get on board with cleaning up the streams. Now, this is another interesting fact, is that improved stream health due to a forest buffer can increase the level of in-stream processing of nutrients and organic matter 2 to 8-fold. Let me unpack that for you. That's why we plant the trees. The trees provide the leaves that feed the critters in the stream, and they consume pollution up to 8-fold. So if you have a buffer with just grass, that's great, but a buffer with trees is 8 times more capable of processing in-stream pollution. Now, this is a picture I took. I stood at a fence on Middle River in Augusta County, looking downstream, and you can see that the banks of Middle River are raw and denuded, and every time it rains, a little more soil gets sloughed off, and every time a cow goes up and down the bank, sediment gets dropped off in the stream, and that sediment actually destroys the aquatic ecosystem. It gets in the gills of the macroinvertebrates, and it actually kills them. And I took this picture and then turned around 180 degrees in the same spot. And the only difference here is the farmer upstream fenced his cows out. And look how the banks are stabilized, vegetated, and it's quite a difference. So this is what we're aiming for in restoring streams. So that's a little bit about the buffer itself. Now I want to talk about the fencing system. So the fencing system keeps livestock out of the stream, of course, keeps them off your flood control dam, out of calving risk areas, and makes moving livestock easier. Most farmers would like an easier way to get their livestock from a pasture into the barnyard. We have to work our cattle. We have to preg check them. We have to treat them for flies. We have to vaccinate them, blah, blah, blah. So using the programs to design a system to not only fence out the streams, but to help me get my livestock into the barnyard easier. That's a benefit to me, the farmer. And we need to locate gates. You can't have too many gates. So we want gates at the end of the fence segment in case of a calf gets in there or a bull gets in. So that's important. And it's also important to have gates that open up perpendicular so that we can get equipment into the buffer area if we need to do some maintenance. So these are important aspects of the fencing system.
So Bobby, before you
Yeah.
leave the fencing system, had some personal experience working in a Southeast Washington situation, and the resistance to fencing was big. For whatever reason, the culture of that location was you don't want to fence your stream because you're giving up something, right? And so it was interesting to watch the technical person that was working with this individual. And it has to deal with some of your seven steps, right? They said, well, what does it look like if we're not going to fence? What does it look like to you? What do you want to do? So, well, I just want to keep the cattle, have a different way to water, right? But I don't want to fence. So there's that piece. Then there was the other piece but I really do want a good area to calve out my cattle at a certain time of the year. And I kind of was looking at this one area here, just happened to be next to a salmon producing river, right? That he did not want to fence. So kind of interesting thought is that that technician took that piece of information that she had listened to and said, well, if we built you that calving area down there and gave you some cost share to do that next to that river, would that be okay? He said, sure, that'd be okay. Darned if a fence didn't go right, next to the river and, and produce the calving area. So it wasn't the water quality motivation. It was the ease and the production.
Well, yeah, now that's exactly what I'm talking about. We need
Okay.
to, we need to sell conservation or riparian buffers from the farmer's playbook, not from our playbook. I've never had a farmer come in and say, well, I want to sequester more carbon, or I want to pollinate a corridor. We need to help them get those cows to the barnyard.
Yeah.
And we need to, I think this is coming up a little bit later, but those hydric features are calving risk areas.
Yeah.
And this particular picture here on this slide, this was Dr. John Wise's farm in Augusta County. Look at that floodplain. Let's see, can we go back to that, Ray?
Sure. Skip on back one. There you are.
Yeah, that picture right there. Dr. Wise, he's a large animal vet. He's our vet. And he told me every year he would have to pull a dead calf out of the Middle River. Because when cows are calving and they have problems, or if you have a heifer that's calving and they got problems, guess where they go? They go to water. They have a calf in a ravine or a swamp, or and they, if that calf can't get up and march and nurse within a half hour, you're going to have a dead calf. So that fence is a huge insurance policy against mortality. So that's some food for thought there.
So a couple things before you move on. Aaron made mention that they recently added new troughs to John Wise. Excellent project, Aaron says. And then Eric offers to you just this one comment, but need stickers on the gates. Keep the gate closed, otherwise the cattle have access to the stream and the fence is not effective. So yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
yeah,
so
that's right.
Good comments by our folks. Keep those coming, folks, in the chat. And in a bit here, we'll probably give you opportunity to raise hand too and talk about some of these things with Bobby. But go ahead, Bobby. Thanks so much.
Okay, now there's a whole lot more to these things on riparian buffers, and a lot of those are in that free download book on Bobby's 7 principles for selling riparian forest buffers. So it's free, you can have it, use it, blah blah blah. Okay, so now the livestock watering system is the most important part of the buffer project for the farmer. Of all the hundreds, maybe thousands of farmers I've helped throughout my career do this, I always ask them, well, what compelled you to do this? And the number one reason is they needed more water. That's the number one reason they did it. So strategically located watering facilities can greatly enhance grazing distribution. It can improve herd health and making moving livestock a lot easier. Okay. Now, we fence the cows out of the hydric features. We've got to provide them water somewhere else. And we've got to recognize that, these things are not maintenance free. We have to recognize this and prepare our clients for this. Pumps can fail. Components freeze. Water lines can clog. Electricity can go out. Troughs can get debris in them. If you don't use them for a long time, they get to stinking, and the cows won't, drink out of them. So you have to clean them out. And of course, there's other reasons. So the point here is we need to design in our watering system a backup system, at least one backup system. Now we have 2 here on our new farm. We have a limited access emergency area where we can open the gate, and they have a small area where they can go into the creek if we have to. But we also have a generator that I can hook up, and it will run the pump in case the power goes off. So just a reminder that we need to design backup systems with our projects. Now, reasons farmers do this. Number one, they need more water. And this is my list from 40 years of doing this. The number two reason is to improve herd health. Number three was eliminating calving risk areas, which I mentioned before. Herd movement, grazing distribution. Program assistance. We could not have done the project on Whiskey Creek had it not been for Virginia's agricultural BMP program, and we had some help from the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay as well. So, you know, there's not only government assistance, but there's private assistance out there too. Few people, you know, fear of future regulation. You know, we get that question a lot. Well, when are they going to make us do it? Well, in Virginia, we have a law now. If the Chesapeake Bay is still on the dirty waters list of the United States in 2025, any farmer with 20 cows or more is going to have to fence their perennial streams out. And lastly, conservation ethic. I had one farmer in my entire career that, you know, I asked him, I said, Kevin, what compelled you to do the project? He said, well, it was the right thing to do. It's one out of 1,000. Now, in the mid-Atlantic states, this is what Dr. Scott Nordstrom told me. At least 50% of all cattle diseases in the mid-Atlantic states are transmitted through the fecal oral pathway. And I'm going to give you a list of those in just a minute. So, you know, and even Dr. John Wise says, you know, the key to, you know, making profit is to have abundant, clean water. Now, these are illnesses associated with polluted water and the fecal oral pathway: mastitis, scours, lepto, bovine viral disease, crypto, foot rot, and parasites. Now, I'm going to wrap things up and open it up to questions here, but I want to make a few concluding remarks. Sponsor participation or producer participation in buffer programs depends on successful outreach and marketing. Never give up outreach. Teamwork and making things simple for the sponsor or the farmer will accelerate progress. The number one reason livestock producers fence their streams is to get more water. And you know, really the limiting factor in a rotational grazing system is water. Strategically located watering facilities can greatly enhance grazing distribution, improve herd health, and make moving livestock much easier. Forested buffers along streams can process up to 8 times more in-stream pollutants than a non-forested buffer. That's why we're planting the trees. So don't forget, you can get more of these tidbits of information off my website. There's my website, and some of you have already downloaded the free ebook, and you know, you're free to use it. I've also got at least 25 one-pager testimonials from farmers on riparian buffers. And this is the one I wrote for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation from Dr. John Wise. So those are free for you to download, and I own these. So if you want some of those and you want to format them on your organization's letterhead or, you know, whatever, we can do that. And also I've got a book that I wrote that goes through. The first part of the book is just fun stories of taking a farm and restoring it. Funny stories about farming, and the second part is about a career of working with farmers to improve their soil and water conservation assets. And the book won the first place outstanding book from the Virginia Outdoor Writers Association, and it's available through my website. 19% off. I got paperbacks and hardbacks. And there's my contact information. And now we'll open it up to discussion or questions. I really appreciate your time, and I'm glad to help any of you. I'll be glad to talk to you about presenting to your group or whatever you want to do. So Ray, we can open it up now to questions.
So I had some thoughts come in on the chat, and then I've got at least 3 or 4 questions. Keep those questions coming in for Bobby, and then that would be great, using the question and answers dashboard, or if you prefer the chat, we can pick it up either way. So in North Carolina, Eric gave us a note here. He said the farmer had 800 head prior to CREP, and he's now certified organic, in part due to the CREP. Now he makes more with his 300 head of cattle instead of the 800. A lot less work for him too, and he makes more money. Any
That's
comment on that?
great. Well, what a story. You know, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And healthier cattle, I'm sure, right? And you know, just better all the way around as you presented. I bet those 7 steps were used during the course of that work that of that producer. So let me just take a couple of these now that have came in. What about using solar for your water pump?
Well, that's certainly an option. We've put in several solar systems, so those are cost shareable, and you know, we use them. So you know, there's several different ways to do it. We've put them on wells and pump water to a reservoir, and then it gravity feeds from the reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's just all kinds of ways to do it. So the technology's out there to do that.
In those really remote areas too, Bobby, where you just can't get juice, you can't get that electricity out there. What a wonderful way to at least get something going, huh? Right?
Right.
Yeah. How often would you allow cattle into the HUA crossing for water? HUA crossing for water.
Now, what's a HUA?
Well, I've heard it a couple of different ways. A hydrologic unit area is one HUA or a particular, but this may be a different acronym than I'm familiar with. But HUA, heavy use area, excuse me, and a hardened crossing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, cattle have to have water every day, so you know, we have in, you know, that's not the best solution, but in some cases it's the only solution, is to have a limited access area where livestock can get water. And in Virginia, we really don't want that hardened use area to be wider than 16 feet, because we don't want the cows hanging out in there. We want them to get their drink and get out. And so if you have, you know, 20, 30 head of cattle, you know, only a few of them are going to be in there, and then the cows are going to want to move them out of there so they can get their drink. Mm-hmm. So it's not the best, but sometimes it is the only solution. So that's one of the tools in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's the one solution that works. And also thinking of the landowner motivation and that sort of thing, maybe the one that that they would be willing to adopt over maybe something that might be better, but they just weren't willing to adopt it. So it's landowner adoption too, huh?
Right. And they, you know, we've got all kinds of options for you know, these water systems. Of course, the best would be a gravity feed system from a spring.
Mhm.
But you know, in most cases, we fence off the gravity area. But that'd be first choice would be gravity.
Mhm.
You know, second choice would be, you know, maybe a pump in the hydric feature to the troughs, and then a well, you know, certainly is an option. And then lastly would be, you know, a hardened crossing in the creek itself.
Mhm. The individual also wanted you to comment on your opinion on allowing cattle access all the time into the heavy use area.
Well, in those cases where, you know, they've got to drink every day and that's your only choice, you got to have it open all the time. You know, that's just a fact of life. So, I mean, you know, now in a rotational grazing system like our river farm, we have one crossing in the middle river, and we have one field we have 5 fields in that farm now, and one of the watering sources is the hardened use area.
Mhm.
And so when we're accessing that pasture across the river, they have to have access to that every day. But you know, they're only in there until they, you know, finish grazing that unit, and then they go to another pasture. So I mean, they're not in there all the time. They're in there every day when they have to drink.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of drinking, did you get your water? Did you get a sip of water or coffee? I'm working you
Got
pretty
one
hard
right
here.
here. Yeah, got one
Working you
right
pretty
here.
hard. So take a sip, and then you can listen at the same time, I'm sure. What factors are considered when strategically locating a watering facility on a farm? What factors would you consider, Bobby, when strategically locating water facilities on your farm? And you tapped on this a little bit. Is there a spring available? Is there power? Is there this, that? But what factors?
Well, you know, there are a lot of them. And the first one would be, what does the farmer think? And
Okay.
we need to listen to you know, to that. Where would you like troughs? Okay. And then you have to factor in, well, if, you know, if we're moving towards a rotational grazing system, you know, where would the troughs be if I was going to have a rotational grazing system? Now, of course, there, you know, the typical engineering factors would be, well, don't put it in a hollow, put it on high and dry, you know, high and dry spot. And then you got to think about pipelines. And on our new farm on Whiskey Creek, we put in 6 watering corrals, and it is a beautiful thing. We have a 40 by 40 corral around each of those watering troughs, and it's sort of a box, and we have 4 gates in each corral so that we can move the cows to 4 different pastures, or maybe 6 if we divide. You know, we can use electric fence to divide our pastures up even more. So the first one is, what does the farmer want? And then we factor in all those other things.
Yeah, they've got a vision already. You're out there out there on site with them, and they got a vision of what they want, right? Whether it be those paddocks, right, that they want to put in, or whatever, or where they think water could be. I mean, they've been there, some of them, all their life, right? So they know where the spring is, they know where the electricity is, they know everything about their place. Your role is to listen intently as a technical advisor, and help them think it through how they could get to where they want to be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
And I, you know, I'll tell you a story. When we got to the river farm and I fenced that off, you know, the cows they have favorite spots where they like to drink and hang out. And
Yeah.
along our half mile there, they must have had 5, you know, favorite spots that they would gravitate to. And the first time that I was with Jeannie and we were trying to get those cows to the barn, guess how much fun that was? We would go to move the cows in this 40-acre pasture. The cows would cross the river, and then we'd have to go around to the road to cross, because the river's 10 feet wide. Well, by the time we got over to move them further, they crossed back over to the other side of the farm where we were to begin with. And they would do this over and over and over. We're outsmarted by the bovines. And of course, a torrent of curse words would come out, and you'd have to have a posse to get the cows to the barn. Now it is so easy. We open a gate and call them. And of course, we've got this little black and white dog that knows what to do. So we open the gate, call them, send the little black and white dog out, and it's, a matter of minutes instead of a whole afternoon. And we didn't have to go to church for a month of Sundays to repent for all the cussing that we did.
Excellent. Hey, here's a question coming in and a comment at the same time. It seems counterintuitive to say that one of the main reasons to fence out a stream is to get more water. Could you expand or explain that a little bit further? That you actually are gaining more water by that fencing, and give us something to offer to the producer farmer if they have this discussion with them as part of the 7 steps. Yeah.
In my experience, a farm, might have 1 or 2 streams, and a classic example of this was a farm we did up in Mount Solon. They had 1 stream at the edge of the farm. They had a 100-acre farm, and the stream was on one edge. And so the cattle, naturally don't want to walk too far, for water. So the grass at the other end of the farm hardly got grazed at all, and the pasture next to the river would get grazed too hard. So the point here is maybe not more water per se, but more places to water is what I mean. So if that farmer had a trough at the other end of the farm, those cows would graze that grass more efficiently. So that's what I mean. Not more water, but more places to water.
More places to get to that water. Clean, healthy, good water, not polluted water, that sort of thing. Right. All right. Hey, would you consider a solar pump? Do you always recommend a backup?
I always recommend a backup, and solar in some cases. So we have to work with the producer to figure that out. In some cases, the utility company is going to charge us, $10,000 to put in a meter. It might be cheaper to go solar in that case. Maybe we don't have electricity, then solar is a viable option. So we need the engineers to help us with those tools, which option is the best option. And so, we have to do our homework to figure that out and offer that farmer the best options. And then, of course, what programs are going to pay for what, also, is that cost shareable, or not?
Okay, good. Could you speak to the importance of targeting a particular community leaders to adopt practices that can then become an ambassador for selling conservation to others? So in the 7 steps, are there community leaders that you involve in this, and where do you involve them to adopt?
Yeah, absolutely. That ought to be another principle. We'll call it 8 principles, but if you're going to have a new product, it's probably good to give away a few new products first and get some traction. So yes, I would absolutely recommend finding the Elmers, we call them, the leaders in the community, and talk to them. If you're just getting started, when we first started with riparian buffers, back in the 90s, NRCS, we didn't even have a riparian buffer practice. Nobody even knew what that was. So when we first started, we didn't have any takers. So we wrote a grant, and I forget where we got the money, but we put an ad in the paper, that a classified ad that said, look, if you let us fence your stream off, we will do some stream bank restoration for free. And we got a couple of takers, and that was our first 300 feet of stream exclusion, and it grew from there, and it just grew and grew and grew. And then my final year of work with NRCS, we did 40 miles in 1 year in one district.
Uh-huh. Wow. It's interesting. And I actually lived through this back when we were first putting, this is a bad thing now, terraces on our place, but it all went down to the McKiernans put in terraces, and they didn't get those big old ditches that we had to break axles with our equipment and so forth. And Dad looked at that and he said, man, I think I need some of those. So he asked John McKiernan, where'd you get those? And he said, well, down at the local conservation office. At that time, SCS, right? Oh, well, and even better, Joe, they helped pay for them. And it was like, oh, heck yes, I'm going in there right now. Turned the pickup around, headed back into town, and got a hold of the conservation folks, conservation district, and NRCS folks. And next thing, we got terraces, and then the Browns put in terraces, and then the next neighbor and the next neighbor. So word gets around. They call it in Hawaii, Bobby. They call it the coconut telegraph.
Yeah.
Which is the informal discussion that goes on between people that are in an industry or in a practice. And agriculture in particular has a great coconut telegraph, right? Neighbor to neighbor discussions, at church or school events, sometimes just over a pickup, in the middle of the road, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So that we cannot not say that is important. And if that particular individual is one that is well thought of, right? They know that their place, their operation is making money and doing fine, then it's probably even a leg up from there. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and building trust.
Mhm.
If they trust you, they will, come along eventually.
Well, that's right. And they trust their relatives around them, right? Or their neighbors around them that they've watched for years. We used to start our combines up when the gummers would start, right? In wheat harvest, we would wait till the John Deere started up because we knew if they could thrash, we could thrash with our Spike 2 cylinder. So, just watching and learning and talking and building trust and relationships. So here's a comment, timing. Let's talk about timing for a bit. Can be everything also when marketing or remarketing conservation or selling conservation. This year has been a drought year in Minnesota, so producers are rethinking their livestock watering system. So you got a timeliness factor, right? Talk to us about that, Bobby, the timeliness.
Well, I have this philosophy, that funding is a big part of it too. So my expression is, when the wave is up, you ride it.
Okay.
And so, we have, in Virginia, we have a robust suite of cost share programs to help farmers do this. The state's agricultural BMP is as good or better than the federal and state CREP program.
Mm-hmm.
It's just as good. And there are 6 other programs that we kind of weave together or partner with to get the job done. But the funding comes at different times. So I like to go plan with people, get that, get invited into the kitchen table and have that plan ready to go. And so we've planted that seed. And when the funding comes, you get your board out and you ride that wave. And you can, the most successful people that get this done is that they use that. The funding doesn't come all the time. The CREP program died when Congress didn't pass the Farm Bill. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be good at mastering these processes. Mm-hmm. So timing is everything. And when that wave's up, you better ride.
Yeah, some of us remember the conservation compliance. Now some of the folks maybe on the webinar remember it in a negative way, but I remember it in a positive way. We had more good conservation plans written to make sure that people were in compliance, right, and could receive their USDA program benefits during a period of time, and we had more residue use, we had more cover crop, we had more, you know, alternative good conservation practices going on the ground. And we had to ride the wave, and we've lost that wave now because some of us, some people on the webinar weren't even born when we were talking about conservation compliance.
That's right.
So I'll leave that with that and go to the next example, which is very nice. When nitrogen fertilizer prices are up, then nitrogen management is more enticing, right? So yeah, if you can save a little money and not put that additional nitrogen on your place, or you split it, right? You put some in the fall and then you come back, you know, later for top dress once you see how the moisture is working and whatnot. Talk about the timeliness of a lot of factors now that our producers, our landowners are dealing with, whether it be on a farming operation or cattle.
Well, to my friend there in Minnesota, you know, this is the perfect time to be talking about alternative watering systems. It's time. And when we have drought, and we have droughts periodically. We had a drought here in July, and a lot of these water sources dried up, and I saw farmers hauling water.
Yeah.
You know, that's when I'd go, you know, maybe have a little short visit and say, hey, did you know, in Virginia, it's 100% cost share. We also need to help these states and other organizations get funding, you know, to get the job done. So, you know, that's another whole aspect of the thing. And that's something the National Watershed Coalition does, I believe. You know, you all go out and get money for these projects.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bubble up these projects into maybe regional conservation partnership proposals, maybe the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, maybe a program by Ducks Unlimited or Pheasants Forever or Friends of the Whoopee Cushion. We really don't care oftentimes in a location whether it's a federal, state, local, or private, right, organization that may want to help with conservation and may just use that perfect timing that Laura mentioned here, you know, to be able to promote their work. The fish wildlife folks in particular, you know, they love to see those riparian buffers going in. You spoke about, Bobby, as one of the 7 steps. And so being aware of all of the different programs and whatnot, and then matching those to what you said was the most important thing, learning with that landowner or producer what it is that they want to accomplish, and then matching that with the available everything that's there. Good sales, good marketing means that you're marketing toward a need that an individual or an organization tells you about. And we can do business across the nation with a lot of different organizations that really like what it is that we do, and many of which are on the webinar today that are with us. So
yeah, we still make house calls.
Isn't that, yeah? And during a pandemic, we're finding out that that house calls are probably a safer place for everybody to be, right? Out in the open, you know, far away from one another, or at least talking 6 foot apart, or doing whatever. And congratulations to all of our conservationists and technical people out there that have done this during a really tough time, these 18, 19 months here of working in this environment. However, you know, you signed on to get out there in the field and work on projects. So maybe the pandemic was, strange to say, isn't it? Maybe it was okay in that aspect that got us back out in the field and away from office type settings and so forth and so on. So you hope that we're doing that. Any last questions, send them in right now. We appreciate all of you that made comments or questions. If somebody would rather throw their hand up in the air and talk with Bobby live, I can do that here. We got just a few more minutes here of our webinar that we want to offer any one of those: chat, question and answer, dialogue, or throw your hand up in the air, whichever it might be.
Well, I'll just take this time to thank you all for having me, and thank everybody that participated. It's been fun, and I hope this helps in some way to get more conservation on the ground.
We do too, and what a wonderful sponsor in the National Watershed Coalition, because some of those projects on a more regional watershed basis turn into our watershed projects, maybe flood prevention, maybe other natural resource disaster. One of the webinars that you can go up and look at in the National Watershed Coalition certainly certainly is the one where the USDA NRCS folks went over all of the different aspects of watershed programs that are available. It's a phenomenal piece of work that was done, and the experts that we had on that. So go find that, because that's a excellent way to promote your projects on a individual farm or ranch, or a group of farms or ranches, all the way up to watershed areas. Well, we talk about evaluation techniques, and here's my most favorite question to ask you, and I'm going to launch this right now. I will implement the 7 principles of selling conservation that Bobby introduced to me during this webinar today. So of the folks that are there, yes or no, got to go. We're going to find out how many of you are going to commit these 7 principles. Again, to remind you, the recording will be up probably in about a week and a half or so, is usually what we're able to do, and up onto the website, National Watershed Coalition. We'll put that back up here on the screen in just a bit. So we certainly want you to implement these things. The real test of time is how you'll implement these things, maybe even adjust them. I know Bobby and many of us in the business would love to hear from you. You can send your comment back into Dan Siebert, or you can send it to Lisa or myself, and we'll make note of those comments that come in, or your experiences in using the 7 principles of selling conservation that Bobby introduced today. And so we just invite you to tell us that story. Maybe you improved on it. Maybe you found number 8. I heard number 8 you mentioned today, Bobby.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention, if anybody wants to receive my monthly newsletter,
Okay.
just send me an email and I'll put you on my list. It's, I write maybe once a month about important stuff.
Yeah. And we've got folks that are still answering that polling question. So let me just leave that up there just for a little bit here. And if you do have interest in contacting Bobby, we can make sure that that's known too. How to contact Bobby for a presentation to your organization or agency also would be very important. Well, we had only a couple of people. Bobby indicated that they would not be using those, and if they do have that reasons, let Dan, Lisa, or I know what that might be. Maybe you're just on the monitor something. Maybe you're going into retirement and won't be using them. There's lots of reasons why you might not be using it, but 58 of the 60 that responded to our poll said, you bet, they're going to be using these 7 principles in selling conservation. And again, if those no folks would let us know that, that's very much appreciated too. We all understand. Normally we would have, go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I'm open to improvements and editing and suggestions, so bring them on.
All right, that's excellent. Thanks so much. Then thanks for participating in our polls today too. We appreciate it. Well, our normal speaker would be Dr. Dan for closing comments, but we have his boss, and his boss is Lisa Noffo, and Lisa, you get to take us to the finish line today of a very, very informative, informational, and particularly important piece of work here by the National Watershed Coalition. So Lisa.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you so much, Bobby. This is a wonderful webinar with lots of information that anyone working in conservation, regardless of your program, will find, I believe, some nugget in there that will help them apply these principles to the day-to-day work that they do. And very refreshing to talk and kind of get back to what I would call tailgate conservation, where our folks need to be out in the field having that conversation with landowners and listening. I heard the word listening multiple times, and I think that is sometimes one of the hardest things that we remember to do. We need to hear from those landowners, those cooperators, those folks that operate that property day to day, and hear what their concerns are before we start offering solutions. That helps sell our programs because they have a vested interest. And so thanks again so much for taking the time to spend your morning, afternoon, whatever it has ended up to be with us. I would tell you once again, up on the screen is the email for National Watershed Coalition if you have comments, suggestions, or ideas. Also, the website is right there. That is where you can access this copy of this presentation later on, as well as others that we've done throughout the year. It is also where you can find the membership information. I'm going to give that final plug for the National Watershed Coalition. Looking at our poll, we've got a lot of new potential members that were on this webinar today, and I'd love to see you join us. So with that, Ray, I want to thank everyone for their time today. And if there's anything that we can do to work with you, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And Bobby, thanks so much for your preparation and your work for our Watershed, National Watershed Coalition webinar today on the 7 steps of selling conservation. Outstanding. If you need any kind of information, please do, as Lisa made mention, reach out to us. So we'll close our webinar today with that, and we thank you so much for attending.